And so, on paper, it seems to make so much sense to have Huberdeau and Lundholm together, and I guess Sharon Govich with his shot as well. In your opinion, why hasn't it worked yet on the ice?
It's a good question, Wilsey. I mean, that's probably the million-dollar question that everybody's asking right now is where to place certain people. A lot of it is, some of it's situation for sure, and the spots they're being put in. I mean, if we're talking about Jonathan here, he's on a power play unit that goes out second now, so that's going to affect how his game ends up going. But the two of those guys, Elias and Jonathan, if we go that way and we use that line together, they have to work together. I think that's the biggest thing, is they have to figure out how to get on that same page. And if we're looking at our team and we need to find a little bit more from certain people, they're two of our key players, and they need to find a way to come together and get the job done for us. Sharon's done a good job over the last little while of improving his game, both offensively and defensively. So there's a shooting threat on that line now too. So it has the makings of something. Now it's up to the three of them to come together and get the job done.
There may not be, but is there any timeline on sort of Jacob Pelletier when you might expect to see him?
No, he's still what we would consider long term. Yeah.
I had a question about one of the drills you had near the end of practice where you had D to D and your forward lines are entering the zone as they are. I guess I'm just curious about the thinking of the guy along the wall passing to the center, then to the winger, or maybe you could explain it a little bit better than I am, but I was just curious about the thinking of why the drill's being done that way.
It's just mainly a drill that we're looking at moving the puck quick, getting our forwards out of the zone quickly, and then it turns into the focal point of being more of an offensive zone drill. So that's just the portion that gets us into the zone, but there's a few layers to that drill.
Ryan, we talked to Jonathan in the room, and he talked about how he feels like he's making plays and it's coming. Are you seeing signs that maybe he could be close to breaking through?
He made a few last night, but at the end of the day, like we've talked about before, when someone's in a slump, the only way out of it is to dig in and work harder. And it's easy to say because, for a coach to say it, the player is like, oh, I got to make plays, like squeeze my stick tighter, and it gets harder and harder. But at the end of the day, you just have to grind and you have to work your way through it, and you have to trust that you're a good player and that you can make those plays. And oftentimes when someone goes through a slump like he has right now, it changes in a hurry. So his challenge is to make sure that he's committed to doing things away from the puck as hard as he can to put himself in positions where he gets to play with the puck. And then from there, it's making sure your feet are always moving, so you have multiple options when he's looking to pass the puck. So that's what it's going to come down to for him. It's not anything about looking for things to come easy. You have to be prepared for everything to be hard right now, and you have to accept that, and you have to make sure you're willing to play through everything that you have to play through in order to get himself back to the level that he wants to be at.
What's like as a coach, and you know how important he is to your group.
Yeah.
What's your role in going through that and kind of trying to get him to where he needs to be?
Yeah, and we have to put him in positions to have success. We also have to think of our team as to how the team's going along at the same time. So it isn't ever about one player, but there's a lot of conversations that go back and forth, of course, with all of our players.
In a sort of similar vein, what's missing from Andrew's, or maybe what hasn't been consistent enough in Andrew's game?
Yeah, he's at his best. He's dog on a bone, and we've used that kind of phrase about him before, where he's around it a lot, where he's, I don't want to say it, but banging into goalies because he's going to the net hard. He seems to always be in the mix of things, and when he is not touching pucks, his game's not where it should be at. So that's what makes him an effective player. He's got the ability to be a good 200-foot guy, and that's what we expect to see out of him. But when he's at his best, he's in the mix. He's right around the puck all the time.
Do you think the penalty issues for him take the dog out of him a little? Like, it's hard to play a game and try to avoid penalties and yet also play that. Has that been tough for him?
No, not at all. I mean, the penalties that he takes are lazy penalties. You check with your feet, never with your stick this way. So when you're mangy dog on a bone, he's like into the pile. He's coming out with the puck. That's what we mean about that. So the checking side of the game, when you're taking a penalty like that, it's got nothing to do with the way he's capable of playing. That's just anytime you put your stick around a guy around his waist getting called nowadays. So that's something that he's working to get out of his game. But when he's at his very best, he's right in the middle of things, and that's what we need to see from him.
You've had a lot of guys move around in your lineup, but a guy like AJ Greer, for the most part, has been mostly fixed on that fourth line. What's it been like being able to count on him as a player you can just have in your bottom six?
He's got a great energy about him, everything that he does, and there's some nights where he'd like to play more. Like last night's an example of it. He would like to have a few more minutes in that game, but he's a real good pro where he makes sure that whatever he's given, he's prepared for. So there's a lot of trust that goes into having a player like that in that position. You know that if you needed a bump up or someone to help defend a lead at the end of the game, someone that's willing to block a shot, AJ's all of that.
How do his point totals now match up to the expectations you may have set for him at the beginning of the season?
In regards to like the number of goals he's put up, you're talking about?
Their goals, I mean, he's 2 off his career point total in a season. Just curious about how that matches up with what you thought he would do at the beginning of the year.
We were looking for a bigger body that had some energy to him, and that's what we were expecting him to bring game in, game out. The amount that he's generated in the short period of time has been a positive thing for us.
What's the balance between, sorry to go back to Jonathan, but like tailoring a system to a star player's strength versus having that star player adapt to the system at hand? Like how do you balance those two things as a coach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we have 21 other players too, right, on our team. So there's I think anybody can fit into any system. I really do. And you look at offensive guys at times, they maybe have to work a little harder on their checking game in certain situations, but they still have the freedom to get the job done and do what they do well. And that's no different here, really. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. We have a team that we expect to play a certain way, and we need to play a certain way in order for us to have success. So that's kind of the way it shakes out.
Because I think a lot of people look at him as a guy that would succeed off the rush or like playing that more like fire wagon hockey type of thing. Do you view his skill set as such, or how do you?
I mean, you look at the game last night, he made plays off the rush. Like he hit Blake Coleman for that chance last night. Blake missed the net. So he's still making those plays off the rush. They're just not falling for him. So there's an example of people can say he's a rush player. Sure he is. Well, there's an example of it last night. He made the play. We just didn't finish.
One of the things you talked about when Martin Pospisil joined the group was the edge he brings, and you're waiting to see it. Are you seeing more of that from him?
Yeah, he's been really good. You know, we took him out of the lineup because we felt he got away from his game a little bit. But since we put him back in, I think he's been pretty consistent with what we're looking for. Like he's willed our team into games. Minnesota's the one example that jumps out at me. But he and his line mates have had impact almost every night. So when you look at our team, the one line that's been pretty consistent with how they've played is the Kadri line. And Marty and Connor have done a real good job there.
I think Jacob's got one of the best high danger save percentages in the league. Like, what's allowed him to be that guy for you this season?
He's an elite goaltender. You know, he gets paid too, and that's his job. He's got to make those saves for us. When we have breakdowns, we expect him to make those saves.